Okay, so we've got this conversation snippet, right? And it feels like something out of a spy thriller. Super secretive, no names mentioned, just shadows talking about some really high-stakes stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.
Like, they're talking about Israel making a move on southern Lebanon, but they're not calling it an invasion or anything like that. It's all about Israel securing its interests, which, okay, sounds kind of vague and ominous, you know?
Right.
So that's what we're going to try to unpack today. What are those interests exactly, and who stands to win or lose in this whole geopolitical chess match?
Well, the thing is, this securing their interests playbook, it's not new for Israel. They've used southern Lebanon as a kind of buffer zone before, mainly because of Hezbollah.
Hezbollah, right. The conversation even calls them the arm of Iran. So, it's not just a simple border dispute we're talking about here. It feels like this has proxy war written all over it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What would be the implications if, say, Israel did make a move and try to eliminate Hezbollah?
Well, you can't deny that Hezbollah is a major player in the region, and they're definitely backed by Iran. So taking them out, it would be a huge blow to Iran's influence. But it's not as easy as just removing a chess piece. You know what I mean?
Right, because then you've got a power vacuum, and
Like,
someone's going to fill it.
exactly. And it's not just about who steps into Hezbollah's shoes. This conversation, it specifically mentions criminal elements, like those involved in drug trafficking, potentially taking control. And that's a whole other can of worms.
Wow. Talk about unintended consequences. So really, we're not just talking about a piece of land here, are we? We're talking about a massive power shift across the entire Middle East. And with it, the possibility of even more instability in a region that's already seen its fair share of conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very delicate situation with very high stakes.
And we can't forget about Iran, right? They're kind of the elephant in the room here. They've made it pretty clear they want nuclear weapons, and their relationship with the West. Let's just say it's not exactly a warm embrace.
Yeah, it's definitely strained, to put it mildly.
And supporting groups like Hezbollah, it's a way for them to project power, even without nukes, at least for now. This conversation snippet, it mentions Iran walking this fine line until they get their hands on a nuclear weapon. Almost like there's a tipping point, right?
Right. It's all about nuclear deterrence.
Nuclear deterrence. So basically, if you have nukes, nobody's going to mess with you.
Pretty much. The idea is that a country with nuclear weapons is much less likely to be attacked because everyone else is terrified of a nuclear war. It completely changes the game.
Chilling thought. Though it does make you think about that line in the conversation, something about Israel's own, quote, secret path to becoming a nuclear power. Are we seeing some parallels here?
Well, there are definitely some parallels, yeah, but also some important differences. Israel's nuclear program, it developed in a very different time, shrouded in secrecy, driven by, they felt like they were facing existential threats. Iran, on the other hand, they're pursuing nuclear weapons on the world stage under a microscope. Constant scrutiny, international pressure. And the stakes, some would argue, they're even higher now.
It's interesting, right? We always talk about these conflicts in terms of like ideology or history or whatever.
Yeah.
But this conversation, it kind of reminds you that there's often a much more basic thing at play. Money.
Yeah.
They even talk about those recent gas discoveries, It's like someone found a winning lottery ticket, but geopolitics style.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking massive gas reserves off the coast of Lebanon, potentially enough to completely change the energy landscape of the entire region. And you know what happens when you've got that much energy up for grabs?
Everyone wants a piece of the pie.
Exactly. It's a free-for-all.
Which is why that line in the conversation really struck me. People fight for their wallets, not for poetry. Might sound cynical,
right?
But probably true. So let's talk motivations. What are countries like Israel, the U.S., what are they hoping to gain in this whole gas game?
Well, I think it comes down to one word: leverage. You control the energy, you control the politics, you control the economy, you've got leverage over your allies, you've got leverage over your rivals, and in a region as, let's face it, volatile as the Middle East, that kind of leverage is, well, it's priceless.
It's crazy, right? We've got Israel, Lebanon, Iran, Hezbollah, and now these massive gas reserves just thrown into the mix. And if we think back to what we were discussing earlier about the war in Ukraine, it really goes to show it's all connected, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You can't look at these things in isolation. The war in Ukraine, it's stretched the West thin,
Yeah.
Resources, attention, everything. And when one side's down, there are always those who try to take advantage, right?
So a weakened West, distracted by Ukraine, that could embolden some actors in the Middle East to make a move.
Exactly. It's a real possibility. What happens in Ukraine, it could easily have ripple effects on conflicts and alliances half a world away. We can't just pretend these things aren't connected, because they are.
So we've got this powder keg of a situation in the Middle East, and we're seeing how a conflict like the one in Ukraine can draw in global players and have these far-reaching consequences. Kind of makes you wonder, what does the future hold when we've got all these different tensions simmering and potentially boiling over?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And if I had a crystal ball, I'd be giving you a much different answer.
Uh-huh.
But even though we can't predict the future, we can try to understand it, right? By looking at the complexities, the motivations of the key players, the potential consequences of what they might do, it all helps us make sense of this increasingly turbulent world we live in. And maybe, just maybe, it helps us find a path towards something better.
A little bit of hope goes a long way. Well, folks, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the world of geopolitics. We've gone from shadowy figures whispering about secret moves to massive gas discoveries, and even touched on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. It's a complex and interconnected world out there, that's for sure. And as we navigate this landscape, it's more important than ever to stay informed, stay engaged, and keep asking the tough questions. Because the answers, well, they matter. That's all for this deep dive. Catch you next time.